May 2005, 21-year-old Yumi Hwang from South Korea calls her parents. She's feeling sick, probably just a stomachache they assume. But as the day goes on, her pain keeps getting worse and worse. The next day it gets so bad that she becomes hospitalized. That stomachache she was having, turns out it wasn't a stomachache at all. It was leukemia, also known as blood cancer. Over the next few months, Yumi would experience all the excruciating symptoms of the cancer. She would feel tired every day, she would lose so much weight that she becomes unrecognizable to her friends and family. But here's the thing, Yumi shouldn't have gotten leukemia. She was just 21 years old. Most cases of the leukemia she had mainly affected men older than 65. She didn't smoke, she didn't have any genetic disorders, so why did a young, healthy girl with her whole life ahead of her develop such a rare disease? To understand why, we need to rewind to 2002, Yumi's last year in high school. Her dad, a taxi driver, didn't have enough money to send her to university, but luckily, she landed a job at Samsung. In South Korea, Samsung often hires what they call obedient smart high school students without a university degree. By working for Samsung, Yumi hopes she can save enough money for a future wedding and to send her brother to university. But that never happens. Because just 3 years into the job, she suddenly becomes deathly ill. And over the next 2 years, Yumi's dad starts piecing together what made his daughter sick. You see, Yumi had gotten a job at one of Samsung's semiconductor factories. And in order to make these computer chips, you have to dip a silicon wafer into a lot of chemicals, a very delicate and fascinating process. A process that exposes workers like Yumi to a lot of harsh chemicals. And the one thing that could increase someone's chances of getting leukemia, you guessed it, chemical exposure. And at 4:30 a.m. on March 6, 2007, Yumi's time had finally come. Yumi and her parents were on the way to the hospital to get chemo, but she wouldn't make it. She dies in the backseat of her dad's taxi. It had become obvious to Yumi's parents and Samsung why Yumi died, but Samsung would never admit it. Instead, Yumi's manager visited her in the hospital every week and offered to help with money from the company if he could. Samsung's compensation offer? 5 checks of around $1,000 each. Yumi's medical bills had already piled up to $50,000. When Yumi's dad said it wasn't enough, the manager told him that Samsung, one of the biggest companies in the world, didn't have any more money to spare. It would take 11 years of fighting tooth and nail against one of the most powerful conglomerates in the world before Samsung would admit any guilt. In 2018, Samsung issued an apology to Yumi's family and the families of over 100 victims that met a similar fate. They agreed to pay out an $11.6 million compensation, with each family only getting around $100,000. According to Samsung, killing their workers is only worth around $100,000. That same year, the company raked in $54 billion in profits. See, in this world, those with the most power can get away with almost anything. Power allows you to control politicians, police, and even the courts. This allows you to get away with all sorts of crimes, like fraud, tax evasion, worker abuse, and yes, even murder. And in South Korea, the ones with the most power aren't the politicians, but those in charge of Korea's biggest conglomerates. There's even a word for powerful families like this in Korea, chaebols, South Korea's untouchable bloodlines. And at the top of all of them is the Samsung dynasty, where 1 out of every $10 made in Korea is thanks to Samsung. For all intents and purposes, Samsung is Korea, as much as Korea is Samsung. And this gives the heirs to the Samsung dynasty unparalleled power. This is how you get away with murder.
When you hate to see
your old TV,
it's time for Samsung.
if you're feeling down,
Then throw it out.
switch to Samsung. People that you meet out on the street are choosing Samsung. You simply can't go wrong, so come along and watch your Samsung.
If you want a lot of power like these Korean chaebol families, you're gonna need an equally powerful wallet to store all your money in. That's where Ridge Wallet comes in. Ridge makes these super high quality, sleek RFID blocking metal wallets. And people love them. The Ridge Wallet already has over 40,000 5-star reviews. It holds up to 12 cards and still has room for cash, and there are over 30 unique designs to choose from, like burnt titanium and forged carbon. But personally, my favorite is the gold version that's plated in real 18 karat gold. And you'll never have to worry about breaking your Ridge wallet, because they're built from ultra durable materials and have a lifetime warranty. Plus, you'll be protected from digital pickpockets thanks to their RFID blocking technology. There is no reason to be carrying around a big bulky wallet anymore. It looks really bad, tacky, outdated, and I personally just hate it. And Ridge Wallet offers the perfect solution. I personally love how slim, stylish, and minimalist it is, and Ridge is sure that you'll love their wallet too. They'll even let you test it out for a full 45 days, and if you don't love it after a month and a half, you can send it back for a full refund. Get 15% off your Ridge wallet today by going to ridge.com/JakeTran and use code JakeTran. That's ridge.com/JakeTran with code JakeTran for 15% off your Ridge wallet today. Thanks to Ridge for sponsoring this video. It's the 60s and 70s. South Korea just came out of the Korean War, and businesses were in desperate need of cash. But because the people just came out of a war, they didn't have any credit history, so they couldn't get any foreign loans. No one would loan to them. So the government stepped in and borrowed money on the people's behalf to give to local businesses. And because getting basically free money gives you a giant advantage over your competitors, these cheap loans help some Korean family businesses become insanely successful. As time passed, some of these industries basically turned into government-mandated monopolies. Entire industries were taken over by a single business, with the government's blessing. The car industry went to Hyundai, electronics went to Samsung and LG, telecoms, oil, and media went to a company called SK, and so thanks to the Korean government, the chaebols were born. And because these giant companies made up the entire Korean economy, the families who owned these companies were directly in control of the entire economy's success. Fast forward to today, and the top 10 chaebols own nearly a third of the country's business assets. The top 5 biggest chaebols make up half of Korea's entire stock market. Over the years, the chaebols have become so influential, so powerful, that they could get away with almost whatever they wanted. Meet Heather Cho, the vice president and daughter of the owner of Korean Air. One day, she forced a plane full of passengers to stop during takeoff because a cabin crew member had served her nuts in a bag instead of on a plate. She forced the crew member to apologize on his knees and kicked him off the plane. The public was outraged at such an arrogant abuse of power and demanded that she be brought to justice. And yet, at her sentencing, she was just given 1 year in jail. 5 months later, her sentence was suspended. This is Chae Tae-won, the chairman of SK, the second largest chaebol in Korea. They own the biggest mobile phone provider in Korea, along with a ton of businesses in energy, construction, telecom, and more. And in 2013, this chairman was convicted of embezzlement, illegally moving company money into his own pockets. He was sentenced to around 2 years in jail. But this was no ordinary prison sentence. During his time in prison, he had more than 1,700 visitors. He was literally running his giant conglomerates from his jail cell. He also had his original sentence suspended and got out long before he was supposed to. Now surprisingly, after being released, he was immediately reinstated into SK leadership.
The business tycoon vowed to do his best to help bolster national economic and social development and to regain the public's trust.
These examples are just scratching the surface. Almost every year, a chaebol family member is accused of tax evasion, embezzlement, or fraud, and they all get away with it with a reduced sentence or no jail time at all. In 1938, Samsung started out as a dried fish trading company worth around $25. Lee Byung-chul, its founder, had no idea that years later, his company would be one of the biggest electronics businesses in the world. Samsung's growth was full of shady deals, like the founder's kids getting arrested for smuggling 50 tons of saccharin, an artificial sweetener, into South Korea back in the 60s. And even decades later, when things were supposed to be more regulated, the next family member in charge of Samsung, Chung Hee, was convicted of bribing ex-presidents and judges to, quote, see things his way, end quotes. He was pardoned after 2 years by the president of South Korea himself. No matter what the Samsung chaebol did, the company just kept growing bigger. Today, they have divisions in everything, from fashion, hotels, hospitals, and security companies. The Samsung smartphones alone account for more than a fifth of Korea's exports each year. and they've risen to the second largest company in the world. This is South Korean President Park Jae-hong-hae. In 2016, a massive scandal involving her, an old friend, and Samsung was uncovered. You see, today, Samsung is majority owned by foreign shareholders, and that didn't sit well with the new head of Samsung, Lee Jae-young. So he came up with a plan to bribe President Park's close friend in an attempt to get the president to give his family more control of the company. After it was exposed, this new head of Samsung was sentenced to 5 years in jail. Unsurprisingly, his sentence was suspended just a year later, and the president of South Korea, she had to resign. Lee Jae-young is known as the Crown Prince of Samsung. 2 months after his release, he was arrested and convicted again, this time on drug charges. Would you want this level of power? I kinda would. Welcome to the channel, my name is Jake, and we run one of the biggest channels on YouTube for documentaries on money, power, and crime. So if you enjoy this one, we make multiple ones of these every single week for free. So click the subscribe button below. Remember, you can always dislike and unsubscribe whenever you want. And if you want longer documentaries that are even more controversial to the point where I can't post them publicly, click that join button below. And if you join and you don't think it's worth it, you can email me and I will personally refund you the money. You can follow me on Instagram at jaketran.io. Watch out for fake accounts. I'm not gonna ever message you asking you to invest in crypto or whatever. That's gonna wrap it up. Stay dangerous out there, and I will see you guys in the next one.